Hello, everybody, and welcome to the last and the #1 Hangout of the IEP MOOC on Learning Assessment. Today, I want to start with a little trivial quiz. Why is IEP MOOC on Learning Assessment organized in the month of February? Now, you will be probably hearing here and there some hints about this response. And if you know the response, please come through the chat, and then those who will win will be awarded in some way. I haven't actually thought about what kind of award you're going to get, but then you can send the message to us. All right. Now today we are connecting Paris and Amsterdam, which is the headquarters of the IEA. Headquarters of course, IEP is in Paris, IEA in Amsterdam, and we have a great pleasure to have, first of all, Dr. Dirk Hastedt, the executive director of IEA. Now he is the director, and but then he has been also working in the Hamburg Data Processing Center as the co-director, and he has been responsible for TIMMS 2003 and 2007 as well as PIRLS 2006, and he also worked on other TIMMS and PIRLS studies. So technically and also managerially, Dirk is a very experienced person and an expert, and now he's an executive director. We also have a great pleasure to have one of our MOOC instructors, Berit, to join Dirk. Berit actually, of course, has been seconded to work with us at IIP now, but she also wears another hat as the chair of the governing board of the IEA, and that's why she's there to work with Dirk. So we are going to go deeper into what the IEA is doing and what are those many studies and what are the characteristics, and those information will be very helpful for all of you who are working on activity 6. All right. Now I'm going to now ask first a question, a general question to Berit. What is IEA and what is the mission? What is its mission? And what kind of a role in the international assessment? I know that we all know that the IEA is the pioneer in terms of cross-national assessment. In everything started about 55 years ago. And then there have been many studies that were organized, and so Berit is going to answer to this question. All right, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mioko, and good morning to all participants across the world. And thank you also for this opportunity to present the IEA and the IEA studies in this MOOC. As you said, Mioko, IEA is quite an old organization and has been working with large-scale assessments for almost 60 years. The IEA was founded as an independent and non-governmental research association, and one of the founders was the late Neville Postlethwaite, who a lot of participants may have heard of. He has been working in this field for a long time. I'd also like to mention Torsten Hussein from Sweden, who also was one of the founders of the IEA. So the IEA has been developing and conducting large-scale studies on the outcomes of education for more than 50 years, and today represents very high-quality studies and also a large network, and this is very important, a very large network of competent researchers, which means that capacity building in countries is also a very important part of the IEA's work. So the IEA's mission is to conduct large-scale comparative assessments of educational achievements and also other aspects of education, and with the aim to get an in-depth understanding of the effect of educational policies and also practices in schools and classrooms within and across all the school systems. So today, the IEA has member organizations in more than 60 countries all over the world. We represent all parts of the world and conduct a large variety of comparative assessments. Since the IEA is a membership organization, all strategic discussions are taken by the IEA General Assembly, which is the governing board of the IEA, and consists of representatives from all member countries. And this General Assembly meets every year. The IEA studies, they are run by international study centers, which are contracted by the IEA, and the studies are run in close cooperation between the IEA and these study centers. Also, joined to each of the studies, there is an international group of research coordinators from each of the participating countries, and this group follow the development and the actual conduct of the studies, and strategic discussions concerning each of the studies are done within these research groups. In addition to this, the IEA also has its own research and data processing center as part of the organization, and this is placed in Hamburg. So the role of the IEA now in international assessments. First of all, as I said, the aim of the IEA is to give feedback to policymakers about the efficiency of their educational systems, and by that also give a basis for change, for improvement, and for further development of their schools. And equally important, I would say, is the feedback to practitioners about the implementation of the curriculum in the classroom, and actually to get feedback on how the students learn and their outcomes based on the teaching. So the IEA studies, they give important and also reliable and well-tested benchmarks for countries in core subjects and at all levels, both primary, secondary, and we also have one study on mathematics and science for the upper secondary level. That's the TIMMS Advanced study. So I will also underline that in addition to the assessments, the IEA studies has quite extensive background questionnaires to both students, teachers, and principals, and at primary level also to the parents. And since the studies are grade-based, this gives a very unique opportunity to assess learning outcomes in relation to the pupils' learning and also in relation to very important background factors. And we know that background factors are important for learning. So today we will discuss more about the two largest IEA studies, which is the TIMMS and PIRLS studies. TIMMS is about mathematics and science, both at primary, secondary, and also upper secondary level, while PIRLS is about reading literacy at the primary level. And these studies have been conducted for more than 20 years and now have 20 years of trends so that countries can follow their development. At the same time, even if these studies have been conducted for so many years, they are also adapting to changes in the education. So they are up to date and relevant at the same time as they also keep the trends. In addition to these studies, I would also like to mention that the IEA has studies in other subject areas, for example, civic and citizenship, and we are also working on global competencies. And this is seen as an important part of the 21st century skills. And we also have studies on computer literacy and information, which is also very important as a part of the 21st century skills. One thing I would like to underline is that the comparative studies is not about competitions. It's not about ranking, but it's about the opportunity to compare and to learn from each other and to analyze the strengths and weaknesses and to follow development over time in a country's education system. I also want to stress the importance of the new Sustainable Development Goals, where goal number 4 is about education, and where we now have close targets on learning outcomes. And that means that the outcomes of education is now stressed more and more in the international world. And that means that it's important to really have valid and reliable measures of learning outcomes also across countries. And the IEA really wants to play an important role in this very important work, especially with the studies on the primary level, which we will talk more about today. Because we know that children's learning at primary level at the early stages actually is very, very important for their later educational achievement. And that's why it really is very crucial for educational systems to assess learning outcomes also at this early stage. So that's a little bit about the IEA, and we're of course happy to answer your further questions. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much for the first question. For a very good overall review of what the IEA is doing, and there are many studies that have been conducted, and then today we will be focusing more on the TIMMS and PIRLS, but then especially more on the TIMMS Numeracy and PIRLS Literacy, plus the newest study which is called the LANA. We'll go into that because the next question is about your experience with the former one, you know, the PIRLS and TIMMS, with the developing countries. And there are some lessons learned from that. And so now you're doing the PIRLS Literacy and TIMMS Numeracy and LANA. So could you go into a little bit on, you know, what you are doing, because the PIRLS and TIMMS are always separated. PIRLS Literacy, TIMMS Numeracy also separated by the subject. Now they're converging, you know, being combined into something called LANA literacy and the numeracy assessment. So can you just talk a little bit about the background of all those, you know, the birth of the new studies, please?
Yeah, Mioko, thank you for your questions, and also welcome from me. It's a great pleasure to present a little bit of our work here. When we talk about these studies, maybe I'll give some more background and go a little bit further back in history. TIMMS, the Trends in International Mathematics and Science study, was launched and has first assessment in 1995 and is conducted since then every 4 years. But of course, also this builds on previous studies. We had before the first international math study, the first international science study, FIS and CIS. Then we had the second international science study, second international mathematics study, and then we moved into trends. So also mathematics and science were separated, and in TIMMS it was the first time that we are doing this together and we are measuring trends there. And that gives a little bit more background also. Why did we do it that way? Well, we think, as Berit pointed out, it's very important to give a good picture, and we want to learn about the educational systems. So we want to have a very in-depth view. So we have not only the assessments, but very importantly also the background instrumentation. And to get a good view of that, we, for example, also in TIMMS, we have questionnaires for the mathematics and science teachers. So we are looking into their picture and get a clear picture of how is the education. And all of this is based on what we call the curriculum model. So we are looking what is the intended curriculum. So what are the country's aim in teaching mathematics, science, PIRLS literacy, and other subjects. Then what's the implemented curriculum? So what teachers are actually doing. And I think we all agree that teachers are the main people that drive the education. So teacher matters. So therefore, we are focusing there on the implemented curriculum. And then with the assessment, we are measuring the achieved curriculum. So what actually is that students know in terms of science, mathematics, literacy, or civic and citizenship education, for example. So it's all built on this curriculum model. And that's also why we are targeting grades, because all the schooling and the curriculum is in all countries organized in a level, in the way that we have different grades where different things are taught with different aims at the end. So let me come back to the question, what did we learn by administering these questions in different countries? Actually, we saw that first, these studies were mainly conducted in high achieving, high developed countries that wanted to compare each other and see how education is done in other countries. So they wanted to learn from the others in that area. Then also in TIMMS and PIRLS, we realized that there's more and more interest in more and more countries in joining these studies and learn about their systems and compare their systems also with others. And again, also here, the comparison is at all levels. So intended curriculum, so they look at what we have in our curriculum compared to others. Also the implemented curriculum, so how is it taught, and then what's achieved finally. And doing so, we realized that we have got a wider and wider spread of the achievement gains in the different countries. And I think also in developing countries or lower income countries, middle income countries, whatever, we see that there are some students at the very high end. We also see that we have successful students and successful education in all countries. But we see a much wider spread of the achievement. So that led us to also developing TIMMS and PIRLS further. And with TIMMS Numeracy and PIRLS Literacy, what we did is we extended the assessment on the lower end, also including some easier items. Because again, it's not about competition and see who's number 1, 3, 5 or whatever, but much more important is also to see what are the successful groups of students and the less successful groups of students, what is strengths and weaknesses of the different educational systems. And what you need for this is not only get an average score, that would be rather easy, but what we want to have is that we can cover the whole range of students' abilities in these countries. And consequently, we need to have items that are covering also the whole range of abilities in these countries. Which brings me again then now to the newest development, which is LANA, which is another extension of that. LANA is the literacy and numeracy assessment. And what we are developing here is an assessment that is based on TIMMS and PIRLS, and especially on TIMMS Numeracy and PIRLS Literacy. So it's the easier items of these assessments, but we extended the scale also more downwards. So for example, in the literacy assessment, we have also something like a word recognition test. So at the very lowest end, we also can discriminate and see more successful and less successful students. And this is the intention. With LANA, we also made the assessment easier in a way that the assessment itself is easier to administer. These studies like TIMMS and PIRLS, they have a lot of rotated forms of the assessments, so different booklets that need to be rotated, since we want to have a broad coverage of the whole area. In mathematics and in science, we have more than 200 items in each of that. to cover all the subdomains in science, for example, like physics, chemistry, biology, geography, or earth science. We want to have a good spread of that. And all the assessment TIMMS and PIRLS are consisting of multiple choice items, but also constructed response items, where the students are required to answer in a written form, and then this will be later on rated by scorers, who then assign a score to each of these answers. So these the whole system and the studies are rather complex because we want to mirror what's going on in the education, and we realize that this is in some countries that are not that experienced in these kind of assessment are very difficult for them to administer. So in the LANA project, we are focusing on multiple choice items only, for example, so that it's also easier to administer, can be scored automatically without any further interventions. So that makes it easier, gives you still a good perspective, and it's also the results will be linked to the TIMMS and PIRLS results, so you see where you are, but it's much easier for a country to participate in these studies. So I hope that answers a little bit of your question here.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, this is not my question. These are the questions coming from the participants. Thank you very much for the answers. Now, yes, you talked about the fact that, yes, LANA, which is a new one, is easier to administer because people have been saying, as you mentioned, that it's very complicated to train the administrators, test administrators, in order to be able to do the PISA and PIRLS studies. And therefore, a lot of participants have asked this question, you know, like what kind of capacities do we have to have in order to do these studies? So apparently, if the country is going to do the LANA, that test administration is going to be easier. So, but then going back to PIRLS and TIMMS, and PIRLS Numeracy and TIMMS, which are still also using the former model of test administration, which is more complicated. What kind of capacity that do they have to have? And then maybe the organization, the IEA, is providing in terms of the training or capacity building that in order for them to be able to run these studies. Can you answer to that one, please?
Sure, with pleasure. That's indeed a very good question, and I think what we should emphasize is also that these studies are not only giving you the results of your country and compare them with other countries actually, but participating in this international assessment is a capacity building issue itself. So we are meeting with all the countries regularly. So TIMMS cycle is 4 years, the PIRLS cycle is 5 years. And we are usually meeting with all participants from all countries every 6 months. So we are all coming together. And then also the participating countries or their representatives are guided through the whole process. And they are integrated in the whole process. So what we first do actually is we develop the framework of the assessment, which includes what we want to measure, how we want to measure, how we want to work on the sample size. And this is presented to the countries and they review it. So they are actively participating in the whole study and how it is conducted, which is, I think, on one hand, very important since there's ownership of participants in these studies. It's not something that we impose on them, but they give feedback, they participate in the development process. And secondly, of course, that helps them that if they build up, for example, national assessments, that then they also know how this is done. And in our experience, we have seen a couple of countries that had no national assessments before and then participated in IEA studies. And after they participated in IEA studies, studies. They gathered a sufficient amount of experience in all the processes needed and involved in conducting a study, that based on this model, then they developed their own assessment systems. And I think that's one of the strengths in participating in this study, to be part of the international community, that you don't have to develop everything from scratch. You don't hire consultants to do that, but you actively participate in these studies. And then by that, you learn how to do it, and you're in a position that you build up your national assessment. So as I said, we are meeting every 6 months. We start with framework, then we are looking to, and we are developing items together, countries submitting suggestions of their items, they are discussed. We look if they're working internationally, so they are involved in the item development. Then there are consultations about the sampling, so that they're also taken through the different stages of drawing a representative random sample for their country. Then they're involved in the analysis. We show them how this is done. They give feedback on that. And finally, also in the reporting. So all the first table shelves are created, and then the final report. And all of this is always discussed and presented with countries. So they are taken through all these stages, which means what you need is someone who is eager to learn, who is willing to commit yourself to conducting such a study. And of course, you need to have access to the information in your country. So these are the people that we're looking at, and if a country is committed, there is usually not a problem of getting people up to speed in this whole thing. So it's not only about results. Participating in the study is always also a capacity building initiative.
Okay, thank you very much. So clearly there's a big impact from the participation. That was also the case when the former, the first executive director, late Professor Postlethwaite, has worked very closely with the one of the regional assessment called SACMEC, and one of the things that was put in place was the series of capacity building that were designed for the countries and those who are from the ministries of education. And that is why that, SACMEC is still trying to do have the capacity building as one of the most important priority. Now, you mentioned that the word ownership. Now, coming back to the ownership of the process, and that means that the countries who are writing the test items and also those who are collecting the data and the entire methodology, that are going to be owned by each of the member countries. Which countries are actually using those data? And then, because that series of questions has to do with, yes, because that seems to be very expensive. We have no idea what the participation fee was. And then also, a lot of people have asked, the participants have asked, what's the cost per pupil? We all know that if you have a big sample, that would cost more because there are more people. But then, do you have some figures like cost per pupil?
Thank you. This was a couple of questions, and I'll try to address them appropriately. Coming to the data is actually open and freely available to everyone. So if you look at the IEA website, you'll find that TIMMS data and PIRLS data and also data from all other IEA studies are freely available to download in different formats, and also software that enables the analysis of this data is available. So everything can be found on www.iea.nl, and then there's a section about data. Of course, also all the publications are there, and they can also be freely downloaded. So we want to encourage people also to make use of the data to do further analysis. And if there are questions, we are always welcoming these and answer these questions to help them getting it up. I think it's such a huge value that we have with the data that we collected. And the important thing is that after the collection, also the countries make use of it. So researchers are looking into it from also their national perspective. We have more than 60 countries participating in these studies, and we don't claim that we are experts on all of these countries. So we don't analyze the data and give advice to countries, you should do A or B or whatever. But our approach is more that we build capacities in collecting this information and data, but also building up capacities in analyzing this kind of data. So we have also regular workshops on analyzing the data. And our hope and what we see also what's happening actually is that researchers from all these countries, they take the data, they know what are the current research questions, what are the policy relevant questions in their country, and they make use of IEA data to find responses to them. And these can be very different depending on the country. Is it gender equality? Is it difference between rural urban? Is it about the teachers? What are their experience? Is it about classroom management, school management, whatever? There's a huge amount of data actually, and you will probably find data that can be used to answer all of this. So that's the first part. You also ask about the different costs for the studies. Currently, the participation fees for the next TIMMS, we have the results of our TIMMS are coming up end of November this year. The study was conducted last year, so end of this year. The results from the last TIMMS cycle will be published, and from January next year on, we will start with the next cycle of TIMMS. So that would be the excellent timing for countries who would like to join the TIMMS study. For that study, the international participation fee is 225,000, and we split the invoice on half is invoiced in euro, half in US dollar, because we have costs in both of these currencies. And we are invoicing this on an annual basis. So divide this by 4, and this is the annual cost of participating in TIMMS. The more difficult question that you ask actually is the question about what does it cost per country or even per pupil. And this is very difficult to answer from our side, since we see that the cost structures in the countries, not only for printing, but also for staffing, is very different. You have larger countries where there's more commuting necessary for conducting the study, or smaller countries where this is less of a case. So different infrastructures also. So what we developed actually is we developed a scheme on what is necessary in terms of staffing, in terms of printing, in terms of computers and software that needs to be available. And we make this available to all participating or even interested countries so that they can develop their budget based on this information. So we have very detailed information on that, but to put a figure in US dollar or whatever next to it, that's the responsibility of each of the participating countries, and we are helping, of course, to do that. But they know much better the cost structure in a country than we do. So we help, but we can't provide a clear figure that would be valid for every country.
Okay, great. So you're also preparing the countries in terms of the, what kind of requirements that are there, and then you have some kind of a scheme which can be visited by those who are interested in participating. Yes. So you also mentioned that those schools, those teachers who are interested in also doing the TIMMS and the PIRLS kind of items, with their students, they can also go to the site, IEA site, to try to get the example items that were made available in public. All right. The final question is about the use of technology. Now, we read that there was a e-PIRLS in the past. We also, I mean, when I met Dirk for the first time many years ago, we visited the data processing center in Hamburg, and we saw a gigantic machine which was reading all the handwritings of the pupils who were tested in all of the countries. All right, and so we are wondering what is happening in this kind of technology, and now with the more direct entry, which is also PISA was using, you know, the pupils were interacting with the computer agent, so that is not the pencil and paper that they have to fill out, but then they actually interact with the computer, and then so we think that the process of data, data preparation, let's say, is going to speed up compared to what we used to do in the past. So what is the future perspective on that one, please?
Thank you. That's also a very good question. And I think it's a very good timing for this question, actually, because that's a process that's taking place currently in a lot of studies. I would like to respond about computers and education in three different ways. One is drawing on what we've done in PIRLS, where we have an electronic PIRLS, actually. And in the electronic PIRLS, what we have is we see that reading, usually we had reading of documents and some narrative text, and we see that reading of non-continuous text, like we find them on the web, actually is another dimension of reading abilities that is required more and more by students, and also covered by more and more curricula around the world. So we also included this in PIRLS as one of the dimensions, the e-PIRLS, reading web-based text and answering questions to web-based text. So that's the expansion that we have in PIRLS. And we have currently 15 countries taking part out of the 50+ countries that participating in that. For TIMMS, actually, also the development goes into what we call eTIMMS, so an electronic version of the TIMMS assessment. As you said, using computers, and for TIMMS, we are trying more to get onto tablet-based computers so that students have a similar experience as writing on paper and pencil. There are huge advantages in terms of data is readily available. There can't be make any mistakes in transferring or reading the paper. So it has huge advantages, but of course, not all countries are currently in the position that they can easily move from a paper and pencil assessment to an electronic assessment. So we still have also a lot of countries doing a paper and pencil administration of TIMMS, which is fine too. And this can be supported, as you said, for example, by high-speed scanning that then can read in the data in a center. Electronic assessments also give us the opportunity to have materials that is more engaging to students, more interesting. So we see also from our studies so far that students really like these assessments, and they can be really fun. It's not something that you impose on students, but they also like to have these kind of assessments, actually. And we're also creating for TIMMS something that we call PSI items, problem solving and inquiry items. And this goes into the direction of, for example, have an experiment. And so the students are interacting with the computer, and based on their input, they are given different materials to work further on an item. which they found very engaging and they like it a lot. The third way that I'd like to respond to it, we conducted the ICLS, the International Computer Information Literacy Study in 2013, and we just launched the new cycle with the main survey in 2018. So it's also an opportunity for countries to know more about the literacy, the computer literacy that the students have. And actually, one of the outcomes of the first cycle was that a lot of people thought that all these students, they're using these electronic devices, their mobile phones and whatever. So there's this claim that the students are already digital natives. But what we found there is actually that it's really necessary also to have digital literacy included in the national curriculum, and really also to teach students on how to make best use of the new and modern world. And also we have a report on that and several policy briefs, etc. on our webpage, so I can also strongly recommend to look at that to have a better idea also of what's required in terms of computer literacy in today's world, and the findings from our study, which interestingly are very similar across all the 20 participants that we had in the study.
Okay, thank you. We'll go back to some questions about the LANA. It's in the pilot study, and some participants would like to know how many countries are participating and what are the conditions to participate, and what agency in each country that they can go and approach and talk to if our participants think it's a great idea to participate. Can you answer to that question, please?
Sure. Maybe come last question first, whom to approach? Well, usually our contacts are the ministries of education of the countries. So we are working closely with them. But of course, if research institute or others have an interest and are able to conduct a study in a country, they are mostly welcome also to approach us for that. LANA is a little bit different from our normal studies. As we said, TIMMS is conducted every 4 years. PIRLS is conducted every 5 years. And one thing that we realized actually is if a country is just before, and we had that just recently, that a country wanted to join TIMMS, and we said, yes, fine. This main survey is just over. You can do it, and we will do the assessment in 4 years' time in your country. That was a little bit discouraging for the country, so they said, we would like to know more about the system now or near future. And that was also one of the incentives to develop LANA, because LANA is something that can be applied in any country at any time. So it's a little bit of a product out of the shelf that can be used in a country whenever it's mostly convenient for that particular country. Of course, that means that if countries also willing to participate in bundles, so if 2 or 3 agree to participate at the same time, there are some cost efficiencies, and so the costs are then reduced that we will have to charge for participating in LANA. So there are efficiency gains if countries are doing this together. But actually, LANA can be administered based on schedule, of course, but at any time that it's convenient for the country, which I think is also one of the big advantages that we have with the newly developed LANA.
So which other countries and the result? Okay, so the LANA is kind of like a training tool in order to be prepared for TIMMS and PIRLS later on. But then the LANA's results are going to be only available in 2018. So then that means that the participation in TIMMS and PIRLS will have to be after the LANA report would come out. So can you also come to this question about which are the countries who are preparing for LANA?
Well, we currently got questions from different countries. So we are still in the process of having countries enrolling and registering for LANA. The issue is that, and I think that might be underestimated by a lot of people in different countries. If you are conduct a study or plan to conduct a study, there are different phases. So first you have to learn about the materials. You usually do a field trial so that you see that all the procedures developed also work in your country and then understood by your staff members. Then you do the main survey where you administer the assessment. Then data needs to be entered, data needs to be processed, analyzed, scores need to be calculated, and then you can work on the report. So the whole process usually takes about at least 2 years. As I said, in a TIMMS cycle with all these different stages, it takes usually 4 years. And you see that also in other international studies that 4 years is usually what it takes also to conduct a study. Therefore, it means that if you start now, it doesn't mean you get the results tomorrow, but of course it takes some time. So you will get your results in 2 years, and I think that's very quick. So you should never expect, I mean, it's very complex procedures to get something a week after. It takes time. And I know that people are very eager to get results, but I would just emphasize that takes time. And you're right, it's a capacity building exercise, so countries doing that are probably also then better prepared later on to join TIMMS and PIRLS. But also the assessment itself will give you results that you can use to improve your educational system and to benchmark your system against other systems that are conducting either LANA, but also that are conducting for the TIMMS and PIRLS. So that's the aim that we have.
I would also like to underline that the LANA is not just a preparation for TIMMS and PIRLS later on. It is actually a study that will be important on its own and can give really important feedback to the countries and their educational systems. So it's not that concrete link that you have to do LANA before you go into the other studies. When we're discussing this, I also really want to underline the importance of assessments and feedback into the systems based on these assessment systems. So not only the results, but actually the analysis and the feedback both to administrators and policymakers, but also actually to the practitioners. This is a very, very important part of the assessments. And in that respect, the capacity building that you get in countries when you participate in these studies are so important for building up the country's own assessment systems and also actually developing the curriculum and their school system. So that is really where the value is in these studies.
Right, thank you very much. Now, Dirk, you will have to run to the airport, so we're going to finish in a minute. I do agree with you. I also noticed that the more capacity building the study, the organization is doing, the more it takes, and it's not something that we can see tomorrow if we collect data today. All right. So do you have some final conclusion, short conclusion at this moment?
Sure. I think assessments are relevant and important, as we also see in the development of the Sustainable Development Goals. So there's a huge understanding that it's not only sufficient to have a good educational system, but also to monitor how it is doing compared to others, but also within the country, what's going on, and to monitor trends of your system over time. International assessments are usually a good step into also developing national assessments, and I can strongly recommend to also visit the IEA website, www.iea.nl, and yeah, there where you see all the documents, you will see information about the studies, study results from previous studies and study cycles, like publications, but also all the data. And to all researchers out there, I can really strongly recommend to use this gold mine that's available freely for you. And whatever you want to know, look at the data, do analysis. There's so much still uncovered, and I think it's a huge value that we have there available.
No, I just want to underline what Dirk said. The capacity building and the feedback into the store systems is really very important, and that is where you can find very valuable assets from the IEA studies.
So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much again for joining us, and thank you, dear participants, to give us some questions, very interesting questions to ask the IEA experts. All right, now this is the last Hangout of IIEP MOOC. So at this time, we're just going to say goodbye, and thank you very much for keeping tuned with us until the end. So goodbye. Thank you. Bye.